and welcome to the Digital Signage Today podcast, produced by Networld Media Group. I'm Judy Model, editor of Digital Signage Today. I'm very excited to have Mike Tippets on to talk about digital signage tech, trends, and innovation. So Mike is the vice president of the enterprise division at Hughes and EchoStar company. He leads the company's corporate communication, corporate marketing, and enterprise division marketing. He oversees teams responsible for public relations, thought leadership, branding, and messaging for the company, and is HughesNet, and EchoStar brands globally. So additionally, Mike and his team drive the marketing of managed services and digital signage solutions for distributed enterprises, including national and multinational retail, grocery, restaurant, financial, and retail, petroleum, convenience store chains. But prior to joining Hughes in 2008, Mike was president of Helius LLC, a startup digital company that he led through acquisition to Hughes. So welcome, Mike. Thanks for being here to talk everything digital signage.
You bet. It's a pleasure to be here, Judy.
So let's talk about Helius, the digital signage startup. How did that company come about? What drove it? And at the time, where was digital signage as a technology?
Yeah, Helius was founded to do business video over satellite. And remember, this was back in the 1990s before the internet video explosion had happened. And in 2004, we were talking about adjacent markets where we could take our technologies and address issues. And we landed on digital signage, which at the time was very early and still kind of in that science project phase. A few brands were using digital signage to create ambiance in their stores or their locations, but it was really very early. We continued to work on the digital signage technology, and then, of course, as you said, became part of Hughes in 2008.
So, from your decades in digital signage, can you share a few turning points? Is there one that was most critical or most important?
I think I'd probably say there's about three, give or take, turning points in the digital signage industry. The one that I always like to point to first is when people, businesses, decision makers realize the usefulness of digital signage for employee communication. It's everything like this is an ROI discussion, and the ROI for front of house digital signage is challenging. We put up a digital signage screen. Did sales go up because of the signage screen, or did sales go up because we had a great product, or it was a weather or other external factors? But when you put signage back of house and you communicate with your employees and you see an improvement in employee morale, you see an improvement in employee retention, you see an improvement in employee performance, you really can point to our communication was better with the employee. So I think when we started to realize digital signage could work back of house as well as front of house, that was a significant turning point. The second one, obviously, was video on the internet. Society, culture, all of us became accustomed to receiving information and even learning things by using video. So that explosion was another big turning point to help bring digital signage further and further forward. Obviously, then, the cost, the third thing I would point to is the cost of screens. They continue to come down while the technology continues to get better. If you think about what you can walk into, a retail location, Best Buy, Costco, Walmart, and purchase a TV for today versus what you could even 5 years ago, it's just phenomenal. So I would point at those three things as key turning points in how digital signage is continuing to advance.
Speaking to the point of cost, and I know this wasn't part of our pre-convo, but is that still like the major challenge and maybe a misconception that digital signage isn't, it's too expensive? It's like something we can't consider because we can't afford it.
I'm certain that conversation does happen, but I think what's more important and what I tell people when I'm asked, for my opinion, is it's an ROI discussion. It's a return on the investment, right? No matter what the cost is, can I get more value than the cost? And I'll give you an example that I share with people. Again, kind of going back to that back of house communication. We did some calculations a few years back, and we determined that to replace a $10 an hour frontline employee, it costs about $3,000. All of the things that have to happen and lost productivity, as well as advertising and interviewing and background checks and all these things to replace that. And so, retail and other of these large scale employers, they've got turnover that's in excess of 50%. Okay. So if I can do something that reduces turnover by 1%, I've probably paid for what a digital signage screen and the annual operation costs are. So, Judy, I would definitely say cost is always a consideration. Big businesses, you say, well, they don't care as much. No, they do, because they have lots of locations and lots of places. And small businesses, they're watching their expenses constantly. But if you take it and you put it in terms of ROI, I really think digital signage has kind of gotten past the oh, we can't afford it. It's now really yeah, can we get the value out of it that we need?
Right. Because, I can see where digital signage can really reduce that turnover hiring cost when it comes to training. And again, that's
Absolutely.
back of the house. And, it's not that training never changes, but it's not something that you have to update daily, So I can see that being very useful. And, I think young people today respond to the visual message.
Hmm.
And that leads me to my next question. Lately, I've just been writing about how studies are reporting that consumers are paying more attention to digital signage. There's more hang time, and it's having a greater impact on their behavior. And I wondered if you guys are seeing that as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. 100%. I've said, and I'm quoting an old adage, but picture's worth 1,000 words. A video is worth 10,000. People today, we expect to get knowledge and information through video content. Even just simple things like product A versus product B. And then if you turn to training, I would much rather be told, here's 6 videos that are on different chunks of the topic, and let me watch those rather than hand me a manual and ask me to read that. We retain better, we learn better. The term infotainment, it's
Right?
very
Oh,
applicable to digital signage,
and
and
that's an old
it's
term,
Oh yeah, no, it is a very old term, but it's very applicable. It's, hey, make it interesting to me. And we're seeing customers that are actually putting personality into their digital signage, because you can with video. You can put a clever image in a book or in written material, but you can bring it to life so much greater with video, obviously. And that applies to back of house communication as well as front of house, communication and targeting and audiences and things. And if you mix in the rise of QR codes and some mobile integration, well, now you've made digital signage interactive and not just passive. And I think that just continues to accelerate the value of it and the adoption.
It's funny because I think some people just are stuck in that whole traditional definition of digital signage. And, it's become so much more technology wise and as a medium. And I was wondering where you view digital signage today. Is it, fully matured? Is it still evolving? Is it a matter of it's there and now it's just improving? I wasn't sure where you thought that it all fit.
No, that's a great question. First of all, digital signage is technology, and therefore it will continue to evolve. Screen technology, it'll get better, bigger, brighter, more attractive, better pictures, depth, and things like that. And then the software and the functionality to display it and to manage it, those will continue to improve. Like I said, it's software and it's technology. Some things that I see on the near term horizon, they include, further simplification of the player technology. hardware players becoming really fully plug and play capable and making them smaller, minimal power consumption. A little longer term, I think you're going to see voice interaction and deeper integration of AI and machine learning. I think the continued improvements will also make the screens themselves smarter and capable of adapting to situations, statuses, and what's going on, including, and I always laugh when I touch on this, but including who's looking at the screen. There's always this discussion about, hey, we can recognize who the person is in front of the screen, and that's an interesting path, but you always run into that privacy discussion. But I think when you start talking about digital, excuse me, when you start talking about digital, things like license plate identification, these are areas where we can start to utilize the technology and the smarts to make the experience even better.
So, to round up, and what are we talked about the cost, but are there any other challenges in play for the brand or the retailer, who wants to jump on this technology, um, in terms of what they need in the back end, in terms of maybe internal resources, or is pretty much everything kind of like comes in one piece and runs on its own? So I just wasn't sure when you talk to clients, besides the cost, what else are they kind of like worried about?
Well, I'll tell you, things that I see them worry about, or I advise them they should be planning for and thinking about, and that's the content. The putting up the digital signage screen or screens. That's step one. Um, how do I feed this very hungry content piece? Okay. How do I keep it fresh? How frequently do I change? And all of that obviously depends on the audience, right? If I'm talking to a corporate campus where the employees come to work every day and they walk past my screen 7 times, a day, I've got to have a refresh cycle for much, much more frequent than someone, in a retail location where I want to keep up with the weekly specials, or I want to keep up with the promotions of the day and everything. But not only keeping the content fresh, but having a process so that the stakeholders within the organization know how to submit and what kind of content is, what options do they have. Security and privacy always going to be concerns. You're talking about technology in a business or government environment, so you've got to be concerned about that. Make sure, um, interoperability. I think that is one area where the industry, we've gotten pretty good. You can move things, get data inputs and different things pretty easily and pretty readily. And then the last thing, and I'll say, is I always tell organizations, before you spend the first dollar, define success. Okay. In 6 months or 12 months from now, what is success? Because it's technology, and you can always do something a little more and something a little more and something a little more. And it's exciting, and you should, but make sure you define success so that in a period of time, whatever that period of time is, you can say, we have achieved what we started out for, and then continue on from there.
Right? It makes the job of working with a partner like Hughes much easier if you have that, mission
Yeah,
statement
it does. It
already
does.
in,
It
in
defines it for all who are involved, and you can all stay focused on
right,
that. And candidly, you don't wind up taking tangents because you see another shiny penny, right? Oh, well, let's go over here,
right.
and then you forgot your core objective, which was very important when you started. And again, I'm very much in favor of continuing to evolve and improve, but make sure that you mark the path along the way so you can say, we have achieved and now we're going to the next, and we have achieved and now we're going to the next.
And it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking there's this whole saying about success in IT is all due to having all the stakeholders involved. That it's not a surprise to anybody, or, someone's not left out. And to me, digital signage, like you were saying, back of end of a restaurant, the same thing for HR in a company. It's the same thing, for hiring new people on a special team. There are so many facets that it can fulfill. And bringing that into the mission statement from the beginning not only keeps you on track, but it kind of like maps out where you're going to also go in a year or maybe 2 years as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And if everybody's aware of and hopefully bought into the mission statement and those key strategic goals or objectives, then you really do have a foundation for success.
It's been great seeing you again, Mike, and talking. And we have to wrap up, but I want to thank you so much for being here.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
And we'd love to have you back at another point to talk about more trends happening.
That'd be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah, because that's a whole separate topic, right? To our listeners, please subscribe to the Networld Media Group YouTube channel and sign up for the DST newsletter so you'll be aware of the next podcast coming up. And thanks again, Mike, for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks, Judy.